Brand transgression. You probably heard of different brands. Let's say, what do you think when you hear Boeing? What do you think when you hear Volkswagen? And you might think, well, there was a bit of a history, wasn't there? And exactly that was the case. The question is, how do you effectively respond when these kind of crises happen? How do you protect your brand? What do you actually do to leverage these situations for a positive transformation? And the question, of course, is who can help us with that? And we have an amazing guest here today. Shailendra Pratap Jain, PhD, is Bret Endowed Professor for Marketing and International Business at the Foster School of Business, University of Washington, Seattle. And that is not all. He has held, and now buckle up, faculty position at Indiana University's Kelley School, University of Rochester Simon School, Cornell University's Johnson School, University of Western Ontario's Ivey School, Cambridge University's Judge School, Indian School of Business, Hyderabad, and Bret School of Management, Mumbai. He is very well known for his widely published scholarship in consumer psychology, and Dr. Jain has extensive publishing and editorial experience in top marketing journals. And besides all of that, he has won many awards for his teaching, especially in MBA programs, and prior to his academic career, because some might now think, is he all about theory and never worked in practice? No. Prior to his academic career, he worked in sales, brand management, and advertising in industry, and is associated with several noted marketing campaigns in India, so he knows the theory and the practice. Hello and welcome, Shelley.
Thank you, Niels. Really grateful that I have this opportunity to share some things that my co-author Shalini Sareen Jain and I have learned while writing this book. I hope you're doing well in Germany.
Yeah, I am. Thank you very much. I have quite straightforward questions here. I mentioned a couple of brands here, and I know that your work, for example, was featured on Bloomberg and other platforms. Let's face it, when you hear Boeing, when you hear Volkswagen, there are qualified people working there. There are smart people working there. So how can it happen? What constitutes suddenly that there's such a brand transgression? And why do you think it poses such a significant threat to companies?
So thank you for that question, Niels. My co-author and I did research for 3 years across 50 years of business. And in this book, we feature 25 case studies. And one of the lessons that we learned, which I'm going to share with you, which I think is a direct response to your question, how do companies like these get into such a messy situation? So one of the principles is it all starts with the leadership. And the values of the leaders are communicated down the line inevitably. And people sometimes pretty much imitate the leader. If the leader says this is good, people think it is good. If the leader says it's bad, people think it's bad. So linking this to Boeing and Volkswagen, based on our research, what we understand is, let me talk about Boeing briefly. Boeing and McDonnell Douglas merged several years back.
Mm-hmm.
And the story goes that before the merger, Boeing was a very strict engineering organization, and the product was the hero. And they did great amount of effort and due diligence in making the best possible aircraft. After McDonnell Douglas merger, we learned that Boeing's priorities shifted towards profit maximization. And we talk about this a lot, profit maximization. Profits are necessary, profits are good. However, when profits become almost obsessively the goal of a corporation, then there could be some gaps that appear in decision making. And one of the gaps that seems to have bothered Boeing was cost cutting, even at the cost of quality. And this happened because of their sourcing of materials for their aircraft. And it also happened because of competition. Airbus was breathing down Boeing's neck, and Boeing wanted to speed up the production of 737 MAX.
Yeah.
So the double whammy they faced were the goals that were set by the leadership. We have to make profit. And the second was to preempt competition from taking big orders. And therefore, we have to speed up production. These two, we believe, were critical contributors to the current situation that Boeing is in. A somewhat similar situation seems to have been in the case of Volkswagen.
And let's face it, what Volkswagen did was criminal. That was not only a flaw in management. I am pretty sure some engineer must have said, look, when you put this device in there, I don't think that's legal. Don't you think that someone had spoken up and probably they were sidelined or ignored?
Yes, in the case of Boeing, I can say this with confidence because data has emerged. And this current CEO has gone on record saying that some of the whistleblowers were either marginalized or they were not respected in some form or the other. In
Hmm.
Volkswagen's case, we do not have those specific details, whether there were situations where whistleblowers were quietened. We don't have those facts. However, yes, Volkswagen is facing a criminal situation, as is Boeing. The
Mm.
last piece of news that I read about Boeing was that Boeing is facing criminal prosecution. In Volkswagen's case, again, the CEO who was involved with the emissions scandal, he initially, in our understanding, misrepresented what he knew. He said, I did not know that the cheat devices were put in the cars. However, after investigation, it was found that he did know, and New York Times unearthed some emails
Yeah.
which showed that this was all pretty much common information in the senior leadership. So leadership is one of the contributors to this situation. The other one is what we call in the book principle over profit. Choose principle over profit, which is related. If profit becomes your be all and end all, we are certain that you will make some mistakes and you'll be slipping on banana peels.
Mm. When we look at your book, Managing Brand Transgression, 8 Principles to Transform Your Brand, let's say you are in a company and people say, look, this just happened to us. We did something wrong. We're very sorry now, but being sorry just doesn't help us right now. What do you think are the first steps a brand should take immediately after such a transgression occurs?
Thank you for that question. The first thing we believe the brand should take cognizance of right away is who are the victims of the brand's transgressions. We understand that there's a knee-jerk reaction. How do we protect the brand? How do we protect the company? How do we protect the profits and the shareholders' value and so on? We understand that. However, if the company can be really trained to think about who are the victims and how do we address their hurt and their pain, we believe the brand transgression, the company's response to the transgression is on solid ground. It's
Hmm.
already started doing really, really good things. This relates to an age old case, and many people have heard of it, which is that of Tylenol. Tylenol in 1982, apparently consuming Tylenol, killed 7 consumers
Hmm.
because there was cyanide in Tylenol.
Oh.
And the legend goes that the CEO at that time, James Burke, said in the first meeting that they had immediately after they learned of the transgression, how do we protect the consumer? That was his first question that he asked. And this happened 42 years back. Unfortunately, this lesson has not really percolated down corporate ladders across the length and the breadth of the planet. Even
Hmm.
today, companies' first reaction is let's protect the brand, let's protect the money, and let's protect the profits and the shareholders. So, first thing is think of the victim and respond swiftly to protecting the victim and addressing their hurt, whether physically, whether psychologically, whatever way possible.
Okay. So when we talk about communication, because, and I'm now going to give you my opinion. As soon as I see any kind of crisis happening, the first thing I usually expect is that a corporation will tell me, oh, we have a team set up, we have a task force, we will not hold back and we dig deep and we will find out everything. And then I'm not going to hear anything specific for a couple of weeks. I assume this is not ideal. What, in your opinion, are the common pitfalls that brands should avoid when responding to a crisis? Because I think that quite a number of brands out there are not doing too well when this happens.
Yeah, I think more brands are doing not well than they are doing well. I agree with you. That's our understanding. So, yes, many brands will probably, what you're talking about is do they simply pay lip service and there
Yeah,
is no action thereafter? There
exactly.
probably are innumerable cases like that.
Hmm. So, how, in your opinion, should they do better?
Yeah. So, what we think is the first thing that I shared with you was address the hurt and the pain of the victim. The second is even if you're not responsible for the problem that seems to be facing the brand, for instance, in Tylenol's case, some troublemaker had injected cyanide in some of the Tylenol bottles. It was
Hmm.
not Tylenol which was at fault, but Tylenol took accountability and they said, okay, this has happened. We will take accountability and we will fix the problem. It could have been very easy for Tylenol to say, it's not our problem, we did not make a mistake, the fault does not lie with us. In fact, regulators proved that it was not Tylenol's fault, right?
Yeah.
But they took accountability. This is very reassuring, and this shows a very mature stance to the relationship that Tylenol had with its consumers. The third is they have to act really, really fast. They have to be thoughtful and deliberate, but they need to respond really fast. So if I may, I want to share a very recent example of a company which acted really, really swiftly, and I think it did very well. So this is a company we all know, which is Apple. They released an ad for iPad in May of this year, which was panned by the creative industry in particular, because the implication of that ad was that iPad and AI will basically crush all the creative industry and so on and so forth. Some people perceive the ad to be communicating that message. And there was backlash. There was a huge amount of uproar about the ad. It was only an ad. However, what I thought was really terrific was Apple, within a day or two after the release of the ad and hearing all the social media chatter, apologized, acknowledged, and took responsibility for being miscalibrated about the potential implications of the ad. And they withdrew the ad and said, we will not release the ad from this point on at all. So I think in theory, it's possible for Apple to engage into a debate and a discussion, saying this is not what our intent is. We spent a lot of money researching and so on and so forth. But I think Apple, by withdrawing, apologizing, taking accountability and acting with lightning speed, we think they were very smart, because the narrative is in their hands. The matter is over. It'll become a case study, and that's about it. There are no consequences. The other thing I think the companies need to do is communicate transparently. It is Volkswagen's case and Boeing's case, it's very clear that there were misrepresentations of the actual facts of the case, which are all coming out now. In Volkswagen case, it's been going on for the last 5-6 years. I can stop there, but these are some things that we talk about in the book. This is how brands need to respond rather than pay lip service. And here is, possibly a silver lining to the idea that brands pay lip service and don't do anything. I think we are living in an age of what we call information democracy, and there are activists all over the globe. And the hope is that the brand, if it does not really engage in restitution, then the activists and the information police, if you will probably keep shining light on the brand and its inaction. And that will probably force the hands, though that's a possibility.
Absolutely. As you tell us more and more about the different principles, and of course I can't force you to spoil the whole book to us. However, when we see 8 principles to transform your brand, we are of course interested in what are these 8 principles. Are you willing to share them with us here?
No, we are absolutely willing to share. Sharing is caring, right? And of course, we'd love the book to be in lots of hands, but the purpose of the book is to help not just the brands recover and transform, but even the entire ecosystem of the brand to benefit from it. So the first principle is what we call do the right thing, which is protect and address the victim's hurt and pain first. That's one thing that we share. The second principle is to take accountability, even if you're not responsible for the transgression. And this kind of flies in the face of rational thinking. If I'm not at fault, why should I be held accountable? You're not being held accountable, but if you don't take accountability, somebody else will, and the narrative will get out of your hand. The third is act with lightning speed. And we talk about this in the context of Starbucks case, which did brilliantly 2019 in Philadelphia, when they were blamed for racially profiling to African-American consumers in one of their baristas, and they reacted really, really fast, and we think they did a great job. And then on the other hand, we talk about the case of Maggi Noodles, which is a Nestle brand in India. And Maggi Noodles was rumored to have certain chemicals in its noodles, instant noodles, which were harmful to health. Excessive consumption was harmful. Ironically, Maggi was proved to be right, that they did not have those chemicals. They were proved to be right. However, we think they did not really respond as quickly as the book promulgates and suggests. The fourth is to communicate transparently. You cannot hide today. You just cannot misrepresent and communicate a narrative which is completely different from what is the actual narrative. Volkswagen's case proves that, Boeing's case proves that, and there are so many cases we cover in the book where ultimately the truth will come out, and at that point in time you will not know exactly how to deal with it. Then the fifth is choose principle over profit. We really believe that long-term profit should be the goal, not short-term profit.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, more brands think about short-term rather than long-term. Then a very important principle we talk about, Niels, which was our conversation before we started recording, is to treat each life with dignity. This is more than just taking care of the hurt and the pain of the victim. This is, we talk about a brand called Dolce & Gabbana, which is a famous Italian luxury brand. And they committed a transgression in China where 3 of their ads were perceived to be misogynistic and racist. And the lot of millions of Chinese consumers were up in arms. And there was a lot of negative feedback for Dolce & Gabbana. They lost some of their footing in China. And this was clearly a case where there was a perception that they indignified not just the women, but also Chinese citizens. On the other hand, there is a company like Ben & Jerry's, which we talk about, which is a glowing example of how it dignifies every human being on the planet. Then another principle is leadership. We talk about how leadership really drives home the good outcomes or the bad outcomes associated with the brand transgression. And the case that we highlight is Fox News, which is
Mm-hmm.
the largest network in the United States.
Yeah.
And it's erstwhile, now Roger Ailes, who's not alive anymore, his transgressions became really well known, which were in the space of sexual misconduct. And not surprisingly to us, what was found later was many senior leaders of Fox News were, culpable for the same offense. There's a movie made on it, and there is so much talk about how Fox News ultimately tried to change its transgressive image. And
Yeah.
then we talk about, on the other hand, the company of Taj, which is a Tata company in Mumbai, when there were terrorists who killed hundreds of people, and 10 employees of Taj died while protecting the consumers. And this, we believe, is an incredible story in how leadership really takes root in a corporation for good or for bad. Good in the case of Taj Mumbai, bad in the case of Fox News.
Yeah.
And the last one is what we call build brand authenticity. And authenticity is a nebulous notion. For us, authenticity is that when you make a promise, drill it into the DNA of your corporation, that this is the promise we will live by, we will deliver minute after minute, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. And it is okay if you make a mistake, but if you made a mistake, then follow the 7 principles.
Mm-hmm.
That's really what we are trying to share in our book. And this book is really not written with the purpose of, fattening up bank balances. We won't complain if it does.
Yeah.
But the point is that there are some really good things to share, not just for the brands to become more successful, but also for the victims, for the other stakeholders to to help understand this is a win-win for everybody. If you build an authentic brand, if the leadership's heart is in the right place, if you dignify people, if you don't follow profit blindly, if you communicate transparently, you act swiftly, and so on, you will minimize the likelihood of transgressions, which is good for everybody on the planet.
Excellent answer. And I think great help for many. Of course, there might now be people who say, look, I'm listening to this and I really want to talk about the long-term benefits of handling brand transgression well, and I want to change my company in that way. However, some people might say, look, we have a board and the board is probably there with a contract of 4, maybe 8 years or 5 to 10 years, reasonably short-term contracts. How do I discuss these long-term benefits of handling brand transgression well when I have people on highest leadership level who are probably there for 5 years or less, who might say short-term profit actually works for me?
Yeah. So this is a classic dilemma that we talk about in our classes, right? In the MBA programs, that short term is short term, long term is really the way to go. And this is a human problem, I would say, or it's a human psychology. Let's look at what's tomorrow and not worry about what will happen 2, 3, 5, 10 years later. If you look at the current sustainability movement, why is it becoming such a pressing need? Because our previous generations did not think about the long term as much. And therefore, we are facing some situations on the planet which are coming to haunt us. So I don't have a solution to that in terms of, think long term. But I think if the board of directors is reasonably clued in about the difference between short term thinking and long term thinking, and their heart is in the right place, there is a possibility that some of these principles will take root. Having said that, of course, I'm pitching my book, but we really, really believe that this book should go in the hands of CEOs and board members and senior managers. The execution of these principles will be in their hands, not in the hands of somebody who is lower on the totem pole, so to speak, because they don't have decision-making rights. And what we can do as educators and authors is to share our understanding and hope that the understanding will take root. But it'll take time, and this is not going to be a quick fix solution. Sometimes the journey from point A to point B is not a straight line. It could go through lots of twists and turns. And really, a perverse way of looking at this is, if you don't believe what we are saying, that's your call, that's your prerogative. And, we hope there is debate about our principles. We hope there is discussion. However, ultimately, life teaches us through experience. Most lessons we learn through experience. And we don't want companies to go through these transgression situations because they can be nightmarish. They can be really, really, really difficult for not just the board members and the senior leaders, but the whole corporation to deal with them. But maybe that is the way they will ultimately experience what exactly is a transgression, what could be the consequences, and what are some ways to address it. So sometimes experiential learning will probably work in driving home some of these ideas.
Very, very good. One last question before we wrap up here. So handling brand transgression well is, of course, great. However, even better is not even to have a brand transgression in the first place. So when now people say the best we aim for is that we don't have a brand transgression in the first place because we have a culture that minimizes the risk of having one. The problem is, let's say Volkswagen, obviously things went horribly wrong for many years because the device that has been implemented is not developed overnight. With the implementation and serial production, probably years and years and years of development went in there, and no one was able to stop it. How can brands build a culture that minimizes the risk of transgression? As the last question of this interview from me.
Yeah, thank you, Niels. A really important question, and if I may, really difficult question. So what we say in the book is there are all the principles in the book are really targeted towards making a long-term difference to the brand. So principle one, which says, address the hurt and the pain of the victim first. If it becomes deeply ingrained in the minds and the hearts of the corporation, that will be a way to minimize the consequences of the transgression. The last two, in particular, the last 3 or 4 principles, which are choose principle over profit, treat each life with dignity, leadership sets the tone, and build brand authenticity. This is where we think some long-term traction is possible. If the company's DNA shifts from profit to principle over profit, that will be a needle movement in the right direction. If the company's DNA becomes really, really, bursting with the idea of treating each life with dignity, then we are talking really long term. If the leadership which sets the tone is committed to creating this environment where brand transgressions are addressed properly and systematically, we are talking really good stuff. And lastly, build brand authenticity, which is make a promise, deliver, and keep delivering it pretty much till the cows come home. Having said that, let me just close by saying one more thing. The word transgression seems to be a really big word. And, this is verbiage, managerial verbiage. At the end of the day, what we are really saying is brands can make mistakes. The famous adage is to err is human. We believe to err is human, and corporations will make mistakes, brand will make mistakes. We do not at all say in the book that you will eliminate brand transgressions, because we don't believe any corporation can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because errors will always be there in our lives as human beings or in brands' lives as brand entities. So we cannot eliminate them, we can minimize them. And when they happen, here is the roadmap.
Excellent. Managing Brand Transgressions, 8 Principles to Transform Your Brand. I can only highly recommend you to read the book. And at the end of this interview, there's only one thing left for me to say. Shelley, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Niels. It was a pleasure talking to you. Hope to see you sometime.